You're watching YouTube, the cable access of the 21st century. It's Wednesday, it's 4 p.m. where I am, and it's time to talk about movies and answer your questions. Welcome to Dan's World. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Dan's World. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Always the first two questions that jump into my mind when I start this video, but I also want to know what questions are jumping into your mind. I will be talking today about the Odyssey trailer. I was excited to see it, and then when I looked to see what other people thought, I was kind of surprised by what I found. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. It's going to be an interesting conversation. And we're also going to talk about some data that was released from Nielsen about Star Wars viewing habits. Usually that would be something for Charts with Dan, but this is kind of specific, and I wanted to go a little bit into it more on the commentary side. So I decided to do it here on the show this week. And like I said, we're going to take your questions. We're going to have to keep the show somewhat brief, hour to an hour and 15 minutes, because there's a big soccer playoff game that I'm coaching this afternoon or later tonight. So I got to make sure I can wrap this show up, get it packaged, and then get out in time for the game. But we got plenty of time to talk about the Odyssey, plenty of time to talk about Star Wars, and also take your questions. And I saw some of your questions that came in before the show, and that is, there's already some interesting questions there. So I'm excited to jump into those. But before we do that, let's talk about the Odyssey. It's one of the most anticipated movies of the summer, certainly one of my most anticipated movies of the summer, one of the few must-watch theatrical experiences of the year. And earlier this week, we got the first real full trailer. We got kind of some sneak peeks here and there, but this was the most detailed trailer yet for the Odyssey. So I was super excited to watch it. Usually I would wait to watch that in theaters, but I really wanted to see more of what Christopher Nolan was cooking up. So I watched the trailer, and then, as I always do, or often do, I wanted to see what people thought. Part of that is for my job, because I like to kind of see what people think about the latest trailers and everything. And part of it is just because I was curious. The thing with Christopher Nolan is there was a time many, many years ago, I was there, Gandalf. I remember when you couldn't say a word crossways about a Christopher Nolan film without there being an army of people on the internet that were jumping to his defense, whether that was the ending of Interstellar, whether that was The Dark Knight Rises. It didn't matter. Christopher Nolan had the most passionate, engaged fan base ready to defend him of any director. That seems to have changed somewhat, because I thought that the trailer for the Odyssey looked really cool. I liked the scale and the scope of it. I liked the fact that it looked like a very Christopher Nolan vision of this non-historical story. And I want to put that kind of already in the discussion before we start. The Odyssey is set in a real-life historical period, but it is not history. Odysseus was not real. The characters weren't real. There's monsters and sirens and cyclops and God. I mean, this is not an actual story from history. So I like that Christopher Nolan is like, okay, yeah, he's playing in this era, but at the same time, he's throwing in a lot of his own touches. And so I got excited, and I was surprised to see that most of the top comments that I saw were negative about various aspects of the film. So let's talk, first of all, about what people have sort of been jumping on with the movie so far. Now, the one that I'd already seen was what I've seen basically since the first images of the movie were released, which is criticism about the costumes. A lot of people saying that the armor that the people are wearing is not historically accurate. That's not what the ancient Greeks wore into battle, and that it doesn't match at all with what the real life thing is. And again, I understand to the extent that this is based on a real historical period. But again, this is not an historical film in the sense of you're depicting real people. This is Greek mythology. I mean, the Odyssey wasn't even written by the person that it's ascribed to, Homer. I mean, it's tradition, it's folklore. It was oral tradition for a long time. It's one of the most famous stories ever told. But I found it kind of interesting that immediately one of the first things I saw about the Odyssey was like, that armor doesn't look accurate. Because if we're talking about, let's even take away, the fact that it's in a real historical period. If we're talking about movies that are about people that actually existed, the idea of a historical movie not being accurate is nothing new. Braveheart, Gladiator. I mean, these are still beloved movies that have, in many senses, not a shred of historical accuracy in costuming or anything else. And yet these are movies that people still love. You hear from time to time people saying like, well, it's not very historically accurate, but it's a really cool movie, et cetera, et cetera. And, I think it's a discussion to have, but I don't think a movie should be judged solely on, is it historically accurate or is it not? Because by that metric, almost anything that's set in a real life historical period is not going to pass that test. And so I thought it was interesting that so much of what I saw was already like, this movie's going to suck. Look at that armor. It's not even accurate. It's like, okay, all right, interesting. But then we had this second trailer that was just released this week, and there were a whole new set of criticisms that were going down to singular lines of dialogue. One of the first comments I saw, and then I saw it repeated over and over again, were people that were upset that Tom Holland at one point says, "My dad is coming home." And people said like that, my dad is coming home. Dad, that doesn't sound like what you would say back in that time. It's like, I mean, yes, I get it. It is a bit more of a modern use of the word father. But again, to see so many comments off of one line of dialogue presented out of context with the rest of the film, there have been any number of movies that are set in historic times that have a more modern sensibility, a more modern way of speaking. And people haven't really had that much to say about it. But like one of the recurring, like I was actually kind of getting frustrated because I'm like, well, I'd like to see what people think about more than just this. And it was like, my dad. It's like, okay, all right. I get it. You don't like the fact that Tom Holland says my dad. And then I saw a lot of criticism about one particular phrase that pops up in the movie or in the trailer. And I'm just going to show you this short clip. Hopefully Universal doesn't copyright claim this video for this 6-second clip. But this is something that Odysseus says as he's leading the army into battle.
Bringing it all. Let's go!
And that's something else that I saw like people say, let's go. Is he a streamer? Was he asking for subs? It's like, okay, I understand that let's go has become the cat. Trust me, like I said, I'm coaching a kids soccer team. I understand that among the Gen Z and Gen Alpha, let's go has become sort of the go-to phrase. But number one, they didn't invent that phrase. Let's go has been used for years. And it's not like Matt Damon uses the more popular, like, if Matt Damon had looked at his army and said, let's go, and all the other stuff that I see, then okay, I could see that. But I didn't realize that let's go can only be used in the context of modern culture, and that you cannot put that phrase in another movie without it being an anachronism, which again, historical movies are full of them. But that was another thing I saw over and over. Let's go. Is he going to ask for subs and streams? Is he asking for donations? Is he going to talk to the chat next? It's like, okay, again, that seems a little outsized from what I'm saying. And then the other thing that I saw was people saying, why are they all using American accents? That's so stupid. That doesn't even sound right. I mean, the Hollywood Reporter, in their coverage of the reaction to this trailer, the Odyssey, everyone using American accents is definitely a choice. This one I get least of all, like definitely a choice compared to what? Because the only accurate thing to the era would be for them to not be speaking English at all. If the criticism was like, I will not accept this movie unless they're speaking it in the original language or with the original accents, okay, that seems a little overbearing. But to say, it just sounds weird American, like British is like they wanted everyone to speak in a fake British accent, which isn't historically accurate either. So it's like, this is why I wanted to do it for the show, was because if it was one of these things or the other, then it would kind of maybe make sense to me. But the fact that the reaction to this trailer that I've seen is overwhelmingly about specific lines of dialogue that I don't think really stick out that much from a movie that nobody's seen, by the way. The choice to use American accents, which are just as inaccurate as using any other kind of accent or any other kind of language, quite frankly, than the original text uses. The idea of taking stylistic choices in armor and then applying it's not historically accurate argument to it in a film that's not based on history. All of it was like, I don't understand it. Why all of a sudden is this movie from Christopher Nolan, who for so long on the internet, and I'm not just talking about people, I'm talking about the same internet people that are now jumping on the movie. For so long, you couldn't say anything critical about Christopher Nolan. Why all of a sudden is everybody now just looking for stuff, it seems like, with the Odyssey to jump on? And so these were a few reasons that I came up with. Number one, and this is how it goes now, particularly with the media, hate sells. So you are always going to hear more of the negative than you are going to hear of the positive. But I did spend some time looking at reactions to the trailer, and I don't think this is necessarily the case because, again, and this is not regular, and I'm not saying this is what regular people, the average person, is saying. This is what the internet is saying, which is a special subset of people. I understand. I'm one of them. The internet's reaction to this is not just, oh, we're going to cherry pick one or two here or there. Like, these are recurring things that I have seen in multiple places on multiple social media sites, YouTube, Reddit, Twitter, X, you name it. I keep seeing these same things over and over, and they're the top things that I keep seeing. But you do also see hate kind of getting elevated. So you're going to see those negative things a little bit more than you're going to see positive things. That's number one. Number two, I think, regarding Christopher Nolan specifically, I think it's kind of a commentary on his career. I think part of it is that for so long, Christopher Nolan was the unrecognized genius. With The Dark Knight, everybody loved The Dark Knight. It got passed over at the Academy Awards. It didn't get nominated for Best Picture. He didn't get nominated for Best Director. And so he'd made this hugely successful film, and it wasn't recognized by the Academy. Its brilliance wasn't recognized. And so he was still the kind of unrecognized genius. And then you had movies like Interstellar, and you had movies like Dunkirk that were very stylistically very singular in their vision, which meant that some people liked them and some people didn't like them so much. I was not the biggest fan of either Interstellar or Dunkirk, but they were incredibly well-made films, which I also would say about those movies. But that kind of added to the unrecognized genius part of Christopher Nolan, which is that people that liked those movies thought that they were brilliant. And so many people were saying that they're not brilliant, including critics, and they're getting passed over for awards largely, again, that they're saying Christopher Nolan's the greatest director of all time. Why doesn't anybody understand that? And so when you would say something bad about him, they would jump to his defense. I think that the modern day Snyder Cut movement originated from Christopher Nolan. Again, I remember back in my Honest Trailer days with Man of Steel, I think one of the reasons that people attached themselves initially so much to Man of Steel is because Christopher Nolan was involved, that he was one of the producers on that film. And so that loyalty transferred to Man of Steel, which meant that you then became a diehard Zack Snyder guy, which means that you usually would go to the Snyderverse, et cetera, et cetera. I think that Christopher Nolan was a big part of that. But things changed, I think, with Oppenheimer, because Oppenheimer was recognized. It was recognized by critics. It was recognized by the Academy overwhelmingly, and awards bodies and everything else. And all of a sudden, Oppenheimer was a work of genius, and everybody was saying it was a work of genius. And I think that a large part of the internet went from, oh my God, Christopher Nolan's so great, to after Oppenheimer overwhelmingly won everything, they then started saying, well, I mean, he's not that great. And then it started going like, look, I mean, okay, now you're going a little bit overboard. And then it started to become picking out things about Oppenheimer and picking out things about Christopher Nolan to kind of go against the narrative. A large portion of the internet is contrarian. And you have to understand that. Not everybody's contrarian, but a large portion of the internet is contrarian. So they're fighting for somebody who's overlooked, and they're fighting against somebody who's overrated. And I think that Christopher Nolan, via his success with Oppenheimer, has gone in the eyes of many from overlooked to overrated. And so that's why I think people are now nitpicking a little bit more. You build them up to tear them down. This happens in culture and society all the time. The third thing is a little trickier, and I might get myself into trouble here, but I think it bears saying, which is that there are also people on the internet who are looking to poke holes in the Odyssey because they don't particularly like some of Christopher Nolan's casting choices. Elliot Page was cast in the movie. Lupita Nyong'o is in the movie, and reports have said, it's not been officially confirmed, but reports have said that Lupita Nyong'o is playing Helen of Troy. And there are people who don't particularly like that Christopher Nolan made those casting choices. And this is something that is another cycle that happens on the internet. There are some people who will just come outright and say, I don't like that this person is playing this part, which, that's one thing. But I think that there is another thing that happens with these movies. There are some people, some people who have big platforms, some people who are just your average social media user, but there are some people who don't like those things but want to frame the movie in a negative light and not invoke those things. So, for example, with Lupita Nyong'o potentially playing Helen of Troy, they won't come right out and say, I don't like Lupita Nyong'o playing Helen of Troy because she's black. They will say, I don't like Lupita Nyong'o playing Helen of Troy because that doesn't match the description in the book. Because the description says that she's this and Lupita Nyong'o doesn't look like this. So it's not about the fact that she's black. It's that she doesn't match the description in the book, which again, I think is a pretty selective standard because if that's the standard, then people should be upset about this. Katniss Everdeen described in The Hunger Games as olive skinned, maybe Caucasian, certainly some very heavy hints that she was biracial or multiracial, but definitely not the complexion of Jennifer Lawrence. If description to the book must be adhered to rigorously, then I think there should be more discussion from the same people who are upset about, let's say, Helen of Troy not matching, quote unquote, the description. They should also be upset about Katniss Everdeen, but you don't really hear that from them. I think the anger comes from the fact that they don't like that character was changed from someone who they believe described in the book as white is being played by somebody who's black. And I can already counter the counterclaim I always get means, oh, so you would be okay if Black Panther was cast with a white actor playing that role? And my answer is always no. And here's why. Because the character of Black Panther, the position he occupies or she now occupies in the MCU and in the comic books is informed entirely by the background, by being African, by being the culture behind that. It is so intrinsic to that character. It's part of the DNA of that character that you change the character's nature if you change the race of that character. Whereas with Helen of Troy, again, this is a fictional world set inside of a real world historical era, but a fictional world with fictional characters. And when we talk about Helen of Troy, what about changing her race? And again, Homer or whoever wrote, the Iliad and the Odyssey didn't say Helen of Troy was a Caucasian woman, but there are descriptors that make it seem like she is closer to the blonde hair, white skin that we've seen in a lot of different depictions. But if you change that from white to black, what about that changes the essence of her character? Other than the fact, and we're just going to get real here, other than the fact that Helen of Troy is described as the most beautiful person in the world, and that changing the character from white skin, blonde hair to a black woman in Lupita Nyong'o doesn't meet your standard of beauty. You don't believe that could possibly be the face that launched the 1,000 ships. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. That's what you find unbelievable. I don't find that unbelievable. I think Lupita Nyong'o is a beautiful woman. She doesn't meet that blonde hair, white skin ideal that a lot of people ascribe to as quote unquote objective beauty. But a lot of other people don't feel the same way. But I think that's why some people are angry. And I also want to be very clear about something. I am not saying that anyone who has a criticism of the Odyssey is motivated by this sort of thing. Not at all. This will get cut out of somebody who wants to quote me out of context, but I am not saying that. I am saying that there are some people who I think are motivated by that. And instead of just coming out and saying that and dealing with the fallout from that, they will fall back on, oh, no, it's not that. It's that it's not historically accurate. Oh, no, it's not that. It's that it doesn't match the description. And I think it should be faithful to the original text. When I think you can see through this. And one of the reasons that the internet, I think, is jumping on this movie is that you have people with platforms like Elon Musk who have already started attacking it, saying that Christopher Nolan lost his integrity by casting Lupita Nyong'o. And so it becomes about how can we criticize it for this thing without saying this is why we're criticizing it. Again, some people, not everyone, probably not even the majority of people, but some people. So I think that is a part of it as well. And so what I think we have here with the Odyssey is this sort of convergence of different things. It's where real world, in many cases, politics and culture are colliding. It's where internet culture is colliding with the ever evolving thing of hate getting the most engagement, and it's where Christopher Nolan's career is sort of colliding with both of these things, where he's gone from unrecognized genius to recognized genius who maybe needs to get taken down a notch. Add to that the fact that some of the criticisms are just people who don't like these particular things, these certain things. Sorry about that, hitting the mic stand there. There are some people that don't like these things that aren't motivated by any of this, but I think it is all colliding into one place. And I think that that's why we are seeing so much criticism of this movie specifically right now in this release cycle. Now, it could be, but when I go see the Odyssey this summer, it could be I come back and say, I didn't really like it that much. I thought it was kind of flat. I thought it was, maybe he was doing some stuff with time that I didn't really like. Maybe the performances weren't great. Maybe you couldn't hear any of the lines of dialogue that they said, like with Tenet. But those are opinions that have been made after seeing the movie. But it looks like there's just a target on this movie's back for any number of reasons that are separate a little bit from the quality of the film. And so I'm already looking forward to / dreading the discourse around this movie when it actually comes out, because it is already tied up in so many different things that I think it's going to make having a really honest discourse about the movie difficult, because you're going to have to caveat everything, because you're going to have to say, well, I didn't like it because of this. It's not that I didn't like it because of this. It's because and it just becomes a circular nightmare of conversation and discourse. I wish that we could keep it to the quality of the film. If you don't like Lupita Nyong'o's casting choice, it can be about because her style of acting didn't fit the role that was written on the page for her, or because you didn't like the way that she was directed, and not have it be tied into so many other different things. If you think that potentially changing Helen of Troy's race is detrimental to the character, you're free to think that, but people are free to also disagree. You can't say that as if it's an objective fact and then say, well, do you have to hate the movie because of that? No, you don't. You really, really don't. You're just applying your own standard to it that other people are not. And I think that you're not above criticism for choosing to apply that standard. That's another thing. When people apply standards like that, they get very offended when people suggest maybe that might say a little bit about them. How dare you? How dare you? Like, well, I'm just listening to the words that you say out of your mouth and connecting some dots here. We shouldn't go on name calling, but it is sometimes nice to think about, well, why do I not like this thing? Or why do I disagree with this? I mean, that's part of criticism as well. It's self-criticism. Anyway, I'm sure I got myself into a heap of trouble with that, but, I try not to step into stuff like that very often, because it does become just a mess. But sometimes I just think somebody needs to say it. There's a lot of voices on the other side that are saying stuff, and sometimes I feel like maybe somebody else needs to chime in with their 2 cents. Trust me, this is only the beginning, because after the reaction I saw to my video that came out earlier this week about the Academy's new rules, I did not realize that so many people were A, still so upset, and B, still so misinformed on the diversity requirements to qualify for Best Picture. And I've been doing a little bit of a dive on that, and I think that's going to be its own video that will probably make this one look like a minor incident, if anything. But so stay tuned for that. That's going to be a deep dive research thing, because I want to come correct with my facts and stuff. I got something wrong, by the way, in that Academy rules video, because I think the text on the new international feature rule to me was a little bit misleading. When I went back and read it, I was like, oh, okay, I see now. But I wasn't the only one to make that mistake, because I thought that the winner of Best International Feature went to the director, but it actually means just that the director's name is on the plaque, but the award goes to the film itself. So the director doesn't win it, the movie wins it, which is the only award where that's the case. That's part of why it didn't make much sense to me to consider it the other way. So I got something wrong in that video, which drives me crazy, because that's on me. I feel like I didn't do my job properly, and I don't want to be out there as part of the misinformation or disinformation on anything, even if it's not intentional on my part. So with this other video, I want to make sure that I've got every single duck in a row, and it does require a lot of deep dive research into some stuff. But I am going to do that. So I guess I'm just not scared about the controversy anymore. I don't know, or I just don't care. So anyway, that's what's going on with Christopher Nolan and the Odyssey. Let's do a little bit of a mini story before we thank our sponsor and before we get to your questions. This was some data that was released by Nielsen for Star Wars Day, which was on Monday, May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. They released some ratings data about what people are watching on Disney Plus. And I wanted to look at it, number one, because I think it's interesting. Number two, because I've already seen it kind of misrepresented in some areas. So I just wanted to clarify what it said. So Nielsen released three major data points. First of all, they released some data for last year, all of 2025. This is by minutes viewed. This is what kind of Star Wars content people are watching. So the biggest watch time, 44.2% of all minutes viewed on Nielsen, on streaming, according to Nielsen on Disney Plus, were the live action movies, which is interesting because as far as minutes available, the live action series have many more minutes available than the movies. But most of the, not most, but the biggest chunk of the watch time was driven by the films. 44.2% of watch time was the films. 38.9% of watch time was the live action series. So The Mandalorian, Acolyte, Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, etc. 16.8% of the watch time were the animated series, Clone Wars, and all of the other ones there. And then 0.2% were the documentaries. And I thought that was interesting because it really does show that even though it's at a minute's disadvantage, the movies themselves are still driving the biggest chunk of watch time. Now, this is the one I see misrepresented the most. These were the most streamed Star Wars titles just for last May 4th, 2025. So this is not, some people I've seen say this is encompassing of a bigger period than it is. This is just for one day, last May the 4th, but these were the most watched Star Wars titles on that day. Number one was Andor. That's not surprising because last year on May the 4th, Andor was in the middle of its second season. So it's not surprising that was the most watched title because people were catching up on new episodes. Then we have Star Wars A New Hope, the first film, then The Phantom Menace in third. Then we have The Empire Strikes Back in fourth, Revenge of the Sith in fifth, Attack of the Clones in sixth, Return of the Jedi in seventh, Rogue One in eighth. And then in ninth, we had Star Wars Tales of the Underworld. Again, that's not surprising because that show released episodes, I think all of its episodes, on May the 4th. So that's why it's in the top 10. It's because people were watching new episodes of that show. And then Star Wars The Clone Wars at number 10. And of course, the thing that most people are pointing out is that all three original trilogy movies are on this list. All three prequel trilogy movies are on this list. And then you have three TV shows. There are no new sequel trilogy movies on this list. And even though this is just a one-day snapshot, and it does include some shows that were currently running at that time, which is going to boost their runtime, that is somewhat telling because I think what really the main thing it shows is that the nostalgia of Star Wars, when people want to celebrate May the 4th, when people want to celebrate Star Wars Day and say, I'm going to watch something Star Wars, the nostalgia of Star Wars, of the original trilogy and prequel trilogy, is obviously winning out over the sequel trilogy. And we all knew that the sequel trilogy has not been as popular as the other two, which is interesting to me because the prequel trilogy, when it came out, was not as popular as the original. I understand the history. I'm not even going to call it revisionist history because it's not like people are necessarily rewriting what happened. But I understand that over time, and as the generation who grew up with the prequels when they were children has gotten older, that there is a lot more love among that generation. Revisionist history would be to say that everybody always loved the prequels, which is absolutely not true. When the prequels came out, at least among people my age, which was late teens, early 20s, they were not universally loved at all. They were, I would say, the opposite. They were ridiculed in many cases, but people over time have softened towards them and people have understood that this is the movie they grew up with, so they feel differently. But what I think this shows is that the nostalgia, there's no nostalgia, and right now the people that are watching Star Wars are not returning to the sequel trilogy movies, um, really for anything Star Wars related. They're going back to the originals. So what I think is going to be interesting tracking going forward is whether there is a prequel effect on the sequel trilogy films, and we're going to have to wait another probably 10 years or so to see if the kids, the children that grew up with The Force Awakens and Last Jedi, attached to the sequel films in the way that the generation behind them attached to the prequel movies. What I think this data shows is that that has not happened, at least not yet. But I've seen a lot of people say, like, see, look, nobody's watching the sequel trilogy movies on Disney Plus, but not without that caveat that it's just one day viewing. And I think that one day viewing, especially May the 4th, is going to favor a little bit more people that are going for that nostalgia, but they're also not looking to the sequel trilogy movies for that fix. It's obvious that the older movies still hold that power. So that was interesting. And then this is the last bit of data that Nielsen offered, which was the most streamed Star Wars titles by generation. So Gen Alpha, ages 2 to 13, The Mandalorian is number one, which The Mandalorian, by the way, was not on that May the 4th list. This is, by the way, for the first quarter of 2026. So this is this year, the first 3 months of the year. Now, Disney probably likes that because they have The Mandalorian and Grogu coming out later this year. And to know that Gen Alpha, which is the young kids, are watching The Mandalorian more than other stuff on Disney Plus, that kind of lines up with what I've heard about The Mandalorian, which is that Disney is going for more of the family audience. And this backs that up somewhat. Gen Z, which is ages 14 to 29, they're watching Star Wars, The Clone Wars, the most out of any other title. Andor, which is ages 30 to 45, millennials. That's me. I'm what they call an elder millennial. I am right at the top edge of that. Andor is the number one show for them. Gen X, 46 to 61, is also Andor. And this is kind of surprising. Baby boomers, ages 62 to 80, are watching The Mandalorian more than anything else. So maybe some grandparents will be taking their grandkids to see The Mandalorian in theaters. Now, again, the fact that these are all shows is not surprising because, as I mentioned, if you're counting by minutes watched, the shows have a bit of a minute advantage over the movies. There's more minutes of show available, so it's not surprising to me that these are 5 different shows. But it is really The Mandalorian being top among boomers and also top among Gen Alpha is surprising to me. But I think that that's probably good news for Disney as they head into The Mandalorian and Grogu, because if they're going for that younger audience, according to Nielsen statistics, they are getting that younger audience on Disney Plus. So some interesting stuff there. All right, we've gone through a lot. I haven't even looked at the comments. I'm kind of afraid to look, but we've gone through a lot so far. I'm going to take your questions next. We're about half an hour into the show. Before we do, though, we actually do have a sponsor for this week's episode. So I want to thank the sponsor for today's show, Factor. We've all been in this situation. It's the end of a long day. Maybe you've been outside or it's just been a hard day at work. You're hungry, but the last thing you want to do is take the time to prepare a meal. It's a lot of work. Instead of getting something cheap, fast, and probably not great for you, let Factor take over instead. If hunger is a setup problem and not a willpower problem for you, then with Factor you have fresh, nutritious meals ready to eat in just 2 minutes. No matter what your goals are, Factor has meals built around them, whether it's weight loss, more protein, GLP-1 support, or, like me, just not eating as much bad stuff. Every meal is made with functional ingredients, lean proteins, whole foods, and healthy fats, with over 175 ingredients on Factor's banned list, like artificial colors and sweeteners, high fructose corn syrup, and refined seed oils. Factor meals are fresh, never frozen, with over 100 meals rotating weekly, including flavors from around the world like Mediterranean and Asian options. Factor shops, preps, cooks, and delivers your meals, so all you have to worry about is eating them. And if you're looking for a great breakfast option, try the smoky bacon and cheddar egg bites. They are a great way to start your day. Head to factormeals.com/Merle50off and use code Merle50off to get 50% off your order, plus free daily greens per box with new subscription only while supplies last until 9/27/2026. See the website for more details. That's factormeals.com/Merle50off and the code Merle50off. Thanks to Factor for sponsoring this episode, and let's get to your questions. I'm excited to dive into them. We'll jump into some of the super chats first. These are some of the ones that came in even before the show started. Carter Ross says, I see many rankings / top tiers requests and the algorithm loves it. Why not doing it regularly with free themes or spots? I have a name for it, Top Dans. Yeah, I enjoy ranking videos as well. I think part of it is they take me a long time to do because I generally want to do ranking videos that I'm interested in. And I'm generally interested in ranking things that have more than 6 or 8 or 10 things in them. I like doing like the A24 horror rankings or going in and seeing, the most successful box office horror movies of all time rankings. And that can be 20 or 30 different movies. Or like when I did the Alien franchise, I also went into the short films, all the different short films. So they're very time consuming for me to do. And I like to kind of put my own twist on them, which means that some people I think do them because they're maybe a little easier, but I like to rewatch everything with fresh eyes. I like to delve deep into topics. So I know that ranking is generally popular with the algorithm. And then there's some things like the Superman ranking video I did, which was a lot of movies and a lot of time that the algorithm really didn't love so much. So really what I've learned is I can't chase the audience and the algorithm all the time. I have to stay engaged in doing what I love to do, or else I'm going to burn out. So I will still do rankings, but it's just something that for me to feel like I'm doing it properly, I have to put a lot of time into it. Christopher Brickner 5181 says Rotten Tomatoes restored the critic review aggregate out of 10 back to their ratings. I still don't get why they removed it in the first place. I don't either. Ooh, I'm going to look. We're going to do a live check-in on Rotten Tomatoes. Let's see. Let's look at Mortal Kombat 2, which I'm seeing tomorrow. Look for the review here on Friday. Let's see. That's from my plugin. I mean, I don't doubt you. I was just going to try to see for myself. I may have to disable my plugin to see it. Deeper rating. Oh, here we go. Deeper ratings breakdown. I don't know if that's necessarily for my extension. So yeah, I'll disable my extension and check that out. If that's, I'm sure you're not lying. That's great. I agree. I don't know why they would have ever gotten rid of it anyway. So very happy because Rotten Tomatoes it's continually frustrating to me how Rotten Tomatoes data is misinterpreted and mispresented, sometimes intentionally and sometimes not. And so any additional context you can give those reviews, I'm all for. Christopher Rickner 5181 also says, did you see the streaming data Nielsen? We just talked about this. Released about Star Wars on May the 4th. I found it interesting, like on how May 4th, 2025, none of the sequels made the top 10 most watched Star Wars media that day. Yeah, as you know, I did. And I hope you feel like you got a super chat's worth of discussion out of that. Air Force Swan says, did you ever cross paths with the fandom wiki side of things? I'm curious why so many ads. It just kills the user experience. Well, I do still have friends at fandom, and they were very nice to fly me out to do movie fights. What I will say is, yes, I definitely did have experience with the fandom ad side of things. And there was a lot of focus toward the end of my time there on how to maximize that and the potential of that through video content on those pages. And that I don't think it would be necessarily stepping out of line to say that that was a major factor in why I decided to branch off and do my own thing. Because when you throw a lot of focus one way, you have to take a lot of resources away from other things that people may enjoy doing, like box office and stuff like that. And so that was a big factor in why I'm here now, because I wanted to maintain my focus on the stuff that I like to do. So yes, I would say I do have some experience with that. But I can't speak to the current focus at fandom or anything like that. I hope I navigated that okay. Freakstunt95 says, as a Southern man, does it ever annoy you when non-Southerners use the saying y'all? Lately, it always seems like it's used in a negative way. Well, I guess it depends on the context. Like if you're using it to mock Southerners, I stopped using it for a while, especially when I moved to California, because when I would say y'all, people were like, oh, y'all, hey, y'all want to go down to the creek? And, it just was used as like a way to insult Southerners because, oh, you sound like a hick. I personally think that y'all is a great, there's no plural for all of you really that exists in English. We're not Spanish. The language is not Spanish. So I think that y'all is a great way to refer to all of you, because otherwise you have to say like you guys or whatever. And I love y'all, and I'm glad that it's getting more acceptance. One of the great things about moving back to Arkansas is that I could use y'all without having to worry about being laughed at. So I'm great with it being used in more context as long as it's not used in a way to make fun of Southerners or be derogatory, because I think it's kind of solves a grammar issue in the English language. Gerardo O. Ariano says favorite Guillermo del Toro and Ghibli films. Well, I'm not as versed in Ghibli as I should be, but I think My Neighbor Totoro is my favorite Ghibli film that I have seen. Oh, favorite Guillermo del Toro film. I mean, it's the basic answer, but probably Pan's Labyrinth, although I am also a fan of The Shape of Water, which is why I still defend it when people try to just say it's a movie about fish sex, because it's about so much more than that. Jordan Collins 444 says, Dan, why is Rick Devens the best part of Survivor 50? Also, would you flip the Mr. Beast coin? Oh, great. Another Survivor question. I get a chance to talk about Survivor. Okay. If you saw the show a couple weeks ago, I talked about Survivor 50 and my love-hate relationship with it. So if you're not caught up, and I'll try not to go too far into this, Mr. Beast was on last week's Survivor, and I was bracing for the worst because Survivor generally has misused their celebrity guests this season. But Mr. Beast was actually a pretty good presence on Survivor. He didn't take over the show. He just came in and presented a twist and was there at Tribal Council and everything, and everybody kissed his butt. But the show went as it does. So Mr. Beast introduced a coin called the Beware coin, and the deal was at Tribal Council. If you're not familiar with Survival, very briefly, at the end of every episode, there's a Tribal Council. Everybody votes for one person. Whoever gets the most votes is voted out of the game, and they're eliminated. There's a player named Rick Devens who is just chaos incarnate, especially because he's on the bottom right now. Like he's on his way out unless he can come up with a way to save himself. And so Mr. Beast showed up with a coin that said, okay, here's the deal. Before we vote tonight, I have a coin. Whoever flips it, if you call heads or tails, if it lands on the side that you call, the prize pool is doubled from $1 million to $2 million. But if it doesn't land on the side that you call, you're out of the game. You're eliminated. There won't be a vote. You're just gone. So maybe you were going to get voted out tonight. Maybe you weren't. But you either get to double the prize pool potentially, or you will lose the coin flip and get eliminated from the game. Rick Devens had just laid out at the tribal. It was one of the best tribal councils because everybody that episode particularly was lying to each other and floating, oh, I'm going to vote out this person, and then go to the same person and be like, oh no, I would never vote you out. And Rick Devens laid it out to everybody. You went to that person and said this. You said that you were with this person, but you came to me and said that you were going to vote him out. So you're lying. You're not being truthful about this. It just laid everything out because he knew he was probably gone. It would take a miracle for him not to get voted out. So when Mr. Beast showed up with this coin, he said, yeah, I'll flip it. And none of the other players wanted to risk getting eliminated from the game. So he flipped the coin. He won. The prize pot was doubled. He got an immunity idol for a future tribal council, and he was not voted out at that tribal council because if you flipped the coin and you won, you could not be voted out. So he saved himself. He got an advantage for the future, and he doubled the prize pool. The turnout was great because he volunteered. If he had not volunteered, if no one had volunteered, then they would have drawn rocks, which would have just been random chance. That would have been terrible. So the fact that Rick Devens agreed to flip the coin and take the risk of being voted out is what made that so great. That could have gone catastrophically wrong. And he is really adding a lot of interest to this season. I'll be curious to see where it goes toward the end. I said I was going to take a long time. That was kind of a long time, but you got me on Survivor talk. And, I have not been a fan of so many of the idols and twists and advantages. The Jimmy Fallon advantage was stupid, and it totally derailed the game for Christian. The Billie Eilish boomerang idol has been absolutely useless, and I hate that they say Billie Eilish boomerang idol 10 times an episode for the first 5 or 6 episodes. The Zach Brown cameo where we left the tribe to go watch him spearfish for 5 minutes was terrible and took total focus away from the show. This actually, I think, worked, but it only worked because of Rick Devens, because he volunteered to do it. Otherwise, this could have been the worst twist ever if a survivor that was in no danger of getting voted out had been randomly by chance chosen to flip the coin and had lost. So Rick Devens deserves the credit for that. Ben Zayton 933 says, Dan, I've read comments about Hugh Jackman being in some kind of cult. Surely not him. Do you know anything about this, or is it just nonsense? Thank you. I have no knowledge whatsoever, and I generally try to keep up on stuff online. I have heard nothing about Hugh Jackman being in some kind of a cult or anything like that. I'm not saying it's not true. I've heard nothing about that. So it's the first time hearing of it. So I cannot comment on the truthfulness of that or not. I hope not, because I think he seems like a very nice guy, very talented person. He's in a cult of handsomeness, cults of handsome men, but that's about it. Rochester Producers 8847 says, as a huge fan of Skeleton Crew, I was happy to see Nielsen report that it was among the top Star Wars shows on Disney Plus. I remain hopeful for another season. Was it? There may have been another report that I didn't see. I didn't see Skeleton Crew on that list, but I know that there are certainly fans of that show. The BTS Mac lover says, I'm going to Cannes this week for 2 weeks. I'm going for a student program and I'm super nervous. I know you haven't been, but do you have any tips on attending a film festival this big? Well, first of all, I'm super jelly that you're going to that. I've only been to one film festival myself, which is Sundance, just this past year. So I can't really speak from experience. What I will say is that, first of all, I know that it is tempting to spend every available second watching movies, especially I would imagine in some place like Cannes. Do take some time and enjoy your surroundings and enjoy the experience, because I did end up doing that at Sundance toward the end, especially. There were some times when I could have squeezed in maybe one or two more movies, but I took the time to enjoy the city and to meet up with people and to enjoy my time there. And I was glad that I did. And also, don't just listen to hype. This director has a movie, and listen to what people are saying, especially if you're going to be there for a long time during the festival. Strike up conversations with other festival goers and ask what they liked, because a lot of times those are the movies that are really worth finding. It's not the ones that come in with the most buzz or that have the biggest stars. It's the ones that maybe have had a screening or two and you hear somebody say like, have you seen so-and-so? Oh, you got to see that. So yeah, listen to the buzz and take time to enjoy the experience. Another comment from BTS Mac Lover says, oh, same one. I hope you didn't, I apologize. I hope you didn't mean to, maybe you meant to post that twice, but I apologize. I'm sorry that you had to spend two super chats on that. Same advice applies though, for that one. Limberlad says, saw your piece on the news this week. It was really well done. I love how you speak on movies. Were you nervous being interviewed, or did your combined online appearances make it just another event? So if you don't know what Limberlad is talking about, KTLA, which is one of the local LA news stations, one of the producers named Nick, who produces the 7 o'clock newscast in Los Angeles, is a fan of the channel. He used to work for the Fox affiliate in Los Angeles. Now he works for KTLA. And he will, about once a month or so, he will ask if I want to come on the 7 o'clock news and do a segment. So most of them are here from the studio. I've been in studio a couple times. And I did a summer movie box office preview for them earlier this week. So I'm glad you saw it. You can, they're all on the KTLA website, the YouTube channel, if you want to check those out. It's a lot of fun. Am I nervous? When I do them from here, I'm not nervous, because it's pretty much like this. I'm sitting in this chair, I'm looking into this camera. So even though in the back of my mind, I know that this is live television and that it's going out to however many people are watching the 7 o'clock news in LA, it feels a lot like doing a live stream or like shooting a video. I will say I got more nervous when I did my last appearance in studio, because then I'm out of my regular surroundings. I'm very hyper aware of the fact that I'm in a studio and there are cameras around me and I'm on the set, like this set that I'm on is being broadcast live right now. I know it didn't make sense for me to say that I'd be more nervous doing that, but it did make me nervous. I actually forgot one of my answers that I was going to give, and I had to like vamp for like 5 seconds while I thought of it. But no, when I do them from here, I don't really get nervous at all. When I do them in the studio, which I've done twice, I do get nervous. Yes, I do. Tyler S. Potts, or Tyler Spots 4756 says, hey, Dan, love your channel. Thanks for your hard work. Do you get popcorn every time you go to the movies? What theater chain has your favorite corn? I wouldn't say I get it every time. I'd say probably 60 to 75% of the time I will. It just depends on when did I eat lunch? Am I hungry? How expensive is it? Who's got the best popcorn? Well, there's not one around me anymore, but I do seem to really remember enjoying Cinemark's popcorn a lot. AMC's is hit or miss. And really the only big chain that's around up here by me is AMC, and then a lot of smaller regional chains. But I do remember really, really liking the popcorn at Cinemark. I used to go to Cinemark quite a bit when I lived down in Central Arkansas. So I'd give the edge to Cinemark. The Tyler take says, do you think Trevor Rao's Duel of the Fates would have been a better episode 9 than Rise of Skywalker? I personally think so. Not the best Star Wars movie by far, but it sounds like a much more cohesive ending. Thanks for all you do. You know, I think I remember reading a synopsis of that script, which again is not official, because so you never really know, is that the actual script? But from what I read, I would agree with you. It seemed imperfect, but it kind of seemed to better mesh the franchise thus far up to that point. Honestly, I can't think of an episode 9 that would have or could have been much worse than what we got with Rise of Skywalker. I really, really do not like that movie. It has its moments. I do think the Han Solo Ben Solo scene is good, but I just think that is worst case scenario for what that movie could have been. There are worse movies, but for a culmination of that trilogy, that to me was worst case scenario. So I don't think it could have been much worse. Yanal Abu Zaid Film says, hey, Dan, the trailer for my debut short film is now live on my channel. I'd love for you and the viewers here to check it out. All right, go check out the trailer for Yanal's first short film. I'm sure it's at the channel that's listed there. Sven is 97 says, hey, Dan, what's your favorite format to watch a movie? Is it IMAX, Dolby Cinema, etc.? I think it depends on the movie. I think that if you find a movie that is made for IMAX, meaning it is shot with the IMAX screen in mind on IMAX cameras or filmed for IMAX or shot in IMAX 3D, I think that seeing a film that's made for IMAX in IMAX on a good screen is the best way to watch a movie. It's certainly the most immersive experience for me. So a movie like Avatar or Top Gun Maverick. Other than that, I don't really... I mean, Dolby Cinema is great, and I love a nice screen and a nice sound system and Atmos and all that stuff. But for me, it's the only thing that really stands apart is a really good film in IMAX that's made for IMAX, and especially one that's a 3D presentation. Again, specifically made to be in 3D, which there aren't many of those anymore. Not the converted 3D, but the ones that are made for 3D. Those are great experiences. So yeah, I would say the best one for me is a movie in IMAX, made for IMAX. The rest, I generally, it doesn't matter as much to me. Paracentury says, hey, Dan, been watching it silently for a decade. Maybe. Do you know anything about Moulin Rouge screenings for its 25th in June? I don't. Let me do a quick Google and see. Moulin Rouge re-release. It looked like there were some in March with View Cinemas. That's the AI summary though. So I don't see any. I see that the Moulin Rouge Broadway musical is closing this summer, but I don't see any official news on a re-release. It'd be great though. I never saw Moulin Rouge on the big screen. I don't think. I came out when I was in college and I didn't see as many movies in theaters. So I'd love to see it on the big screen. Drew Skizzy says, have you had any Michael Jackson playing after seeing the movie? Yeah, a little bit, I'd say, here and there. It's been around a lot more. So it's come up on, like if I'm listening to music and it's cycling on random or satellite radio. Michael Jackson's music is amazing. That's just, for me, that's just the truth. What are the odds we get Star Wars episodes 10, 11, and 12? And should we? I think a big time jump is necessary to keep the franchise fresh. On a long enough timeline, I think the odds are pretty close to 100% that there's going to be Star Wars episode 10, 11, and 12. Maybe not in 5 years, but maybe in 10 or 15 years, which is what we saw with the prequel trilogy. Should we? It just depends on the story. If you would have asked me before Rogue One came out, should they be making a movie about stealing the plans for the Death Star, I would have said no. What story is there to tell? And I would have been wrong because it was a great movie. So should we? I think they should if they have a great story to tell. I think a big time jump is necessary to keep the franchise fresh. Honestly, more than episode 10, 11, or 12, if you're doing a big time jump, just make a new trilogy. Just don't call it episode 10, 11, and 12. I think the episode numbers at this point might hurt as much as they help. So if you're going to do a big jump and really refresh everything, just make a new trilogy of movies. And not have them be part of the episode count. Christopher Bigelow says, just a reminder to all your other fans, don't argue with accounts that have no profile pic. I foolishly fell into this last night over Lapita's casting. All right, that's a good. There does seem to be kind of a high correlation between no profile pic and willingness to engage in debate that is sometimes in bad faith. Geek Factor says, to lighten things up, would you rather every time you go to watch a movie, it's Ice Cube's War of the Worlds, or every time you go to listen to a song, it's a Poker Face sung by the Minions? So you're basically saying, would I give up movies or would I give up music? And between those two, I guess I would rather, I guess I'd have to give up music because I don't know if I could give up movies. I don't know if all the great music in the world would make up for the fact that the only movie I could watch would be War of the Worlds. Whereas if I could watch amazing movies, I think I could live with not having music. They would both be torture. But I think I would go with every song I listen to being Poker Face by the Minions, because at least Poker Face is a good song, I guess. But yeah, it's basically would I choose movies or music? And I think the answer is movies. But God, my heart would break at losing music because I do love great music. Potter Party 01 says, any chance of an I Swear review? One of my favorites from last year. If you've not seen it yet, fire up your VPN. Been on UK Netflix since March. I was hoping that I Swear was going to play near me, and it was in like 600 theaters for 1 week, and then they all went away and it never played. So I do very much want to see it. I don't know if we'll do a full review, and I'd have to check in to see. I'm afraid if I use my VPN to go on UK Netflix, I'm going to get busted for some reason, but we'll see. Maybe. Cohen Prince 3611 says, I saw a special trailer of the Odyssey when I visited London to see Project Hail Mary in IMAX 70mm. The Odyssey is going to be incredible. Trust me. I saw whatever the first trailer was that was in IMAX, and it looked great. I think it was when I went to see Project Hail Mary as well. So I hope so. Johnny Stacy 786 says, for you to make a recommendation, what are your expectations for the Odyssey, if any? By now, would you be surprised if it came out to mixed reviews? For you to make a recommendation, what are your expectations for the Odyssey? So do you mean like for me to, what would my expectation be for me to recommend the movie? I mean, it would just have to be a good movie. I know it's going to look great. Dunkirk looked great. Tenet looked great. Interstellar looked great. But for me, it's got to have a cohesive story, good characters, good character development, good acting, intelligible dialogue. I don't really set a metric for what I need out of a movie to be recommended. I just kind of let it take me on a journey. Would I be surprised if it came out to mixed reviews? No, because Tenet came out to mixed reviews. Dunkirk reviews were positive, but there were some that were a little critical. Same with Interstellar. So no, it wouldn't surprise me at all. It's not guaranteed it's going to be brilliant. Daiji Shinomori became a YouTube member. Thank you very much. Welcome. I hope you enjoy voting in the polls and getting your custom badges and emoji for the comments. N Shearer 01 says, any plans to see the Sheep Detectives? No pending plans, although I've heard good things about it. It's just all about time management. Jam LFC Forever says, hi, Dan, big fan since the Screen Junkies days. Did you watch Alien Earth? And on that note, which franchise is currently in the best health, Alien or Predator? I did watch Alien Earth. So I was going to do a review of Alien Earth, but it ended literally the week I was moving from my old house to this house. And it just wasn't, I had a plan to do it. And then of course, when you're moving, a million different things happen and pop up, and it just never happened. I thought for the first half or so of Alien Earth, I was watching it and I was just like, this is the best Alien piece of franchise content or whatever you want to call it since Aliens. I was like, this is the best Alien thing in like 40 years. Toward the end, it fell off a bit for me. I thought it started off great. And then by the end, I was a lot more ambivalent about it. Part of it was I didn't know or I'd forgotten that it was going to continue. So I was like really anxious to see how they were going to wrap up the story. And then they didn't at all. They didn't resolve anything. I understand that's TV, but I think storytelling also, you can wrap up some things. So I cooled on Alien Earth quite a bit as it went on. And that probably contributed to me not doing the review, because to me, a mixed review is much less interesting. And I feel less urgent about getting it out. If it had been the best Alien thing since 86 all the way through, I probably would have found the time so I could get the word out and be like, go watch this right now. Cause I love doing that as a critic, but I did watch it. On that note, which franchise is currently in the best health? I think Predator's in the best health. Alien is still kind of drifting. Predator's put out some really well-received films, theatrical and streaming. So I'd say Predator, strangely, is in better health right now than Alien. Brenton C says, now that Sean Penn has entered the 3 acting Oscars club, what other actor would you like to see win his 3rd Oscar? Hanks, Denzel, Blanchett, De Niro? Um, hmm. That's a good question. I mean, Blanchett, I wish had won for Tar. I don't begrudge the fact that she didn't win. That was a very competitive year, but I thought that she was amazing in that. I mean, well, Denzel. I think when people ask me right now, like, who do you think the best actor working today is? It's hard for me to top. It's hard for me to say it's not Denzel. I think that Denzel's brilliant, and I think that he should have won more Academy Awards. And I would love for him to see a 3rd one, only because he wouldn't care. That's what I love about Denzel is he wouldn't he'd be happy he won, but he would be just as likely to call out the Academy from the stage as he would be to give the same teary speech we've seen. I would love to see Denzel win in his sort of like late career era, I don't care phase. I think that'd be great. So I'm going to go with Denzel just for the theater of it alone and because he would have done something amazing. The Tyler Take says, I agree with you about the Helen casting. I say that so this question won't feel like a trap. What do you think of the Snape casting for the Harry Potter reboot? Everyone I've heard has said it makes the characters seem like racist. Well, I mean, there are situations that are presented in the book that change potentially change their nature when you make Snape black. That's true because he was heavily bullied at school, and even the mechanics of how they bully him take on a different context when you change the character's race. That one for me is a very much a wait and see thing because I think that you can do that recasting, but you do have to change a little bit about the character, and I think that you could because Snape was outcast and Snape was sort of rejected by his peers. And I think that there is a way you have to acknowledge if you change the race, I think you have to acknowledge potentially the role that played. I think that you can make that change part of the character, but if you ignore it, then it's just going to kind of seem empty. And I like the actor that they cast in the role, but I think that's a case for me of wait and see where there's some potentially interesting avenues to go down with the character of Snape that exists and changing his race. But if none of that is explored, then I think it comes off looking like they didn't think about it, like it was kind of thoughtless. And I think that I'm not saying that you can just plug and play any actor, but I think that there are opportunities sometimes if you're changing the race of a character from how they may be depicted in the source material, where you can make that character more complex and add more complexity. And that opportunity is there for Snape, but I'm curious to see what they do with it. Cartoon 49 says, what 3 underrated mid to late 90s films rarely talked about? That is a lot of qualifiers. 3 underrated mid to late 90s films that are rarely talked about. It's hard to think off the top of my head. I would say Empire Records. I don't know if Empire Records is I think maybe it's more popular. At the time, Empire Records did not stand with all of the other kind of iconic films of its time. And I really liked it a lot. That was when you had to kind of discover. So that would be up there. Mid to late 90s, though. I mean, that's when I was in high school. So I wasn't quite as plugged into the movie scene as I was later on. So I would say Empire Records is the one that jumps to mind. I don't have 2 others that immediately come to my mind, but that's the one I immediately think of. Jake Dyer 8572 says, hello, Dan. Really admire your views since the Screen Junkies days. Also, have you heard the news of the passing of the founder of Cartoon Network and CNN mogul Ted Turner? Yeah, I read about that today. I mean, he did. He was a polarizing figure in the industry, but he did revolutionize the cable industry and certainly the news industry with CNN. I know that one of the things he did was he was kind of behind wanting to colorize old films, and he met a lot of pushback against that in Hollywood, and ultimately backed off largely on that. So not every idea he had was great, but you can't deny that he did absolutely reshape the cable landscape and the news landscape with what he did. Darth Muffet says, sorry if you mentioned this, but why wouldn't Doomsday move to 12/11 or just don't be that far from Christmas? I think it's just they want to stick to their guns. They like that spot. They like where they are. I think, as you mentioned, ego may have something to do with it. They don't want to look like they're backing down, or maybe Disney just said, listen, we think the movie's going to perform here. We're not going to have IMAX. That's okay. We'll invent our own format and we're still going to do well. And I've said this about the holiday window before. The whole opening weekend thing is less important when you're right around Christmas, because a lot of times those 2 weeks after, like the week before and especially the week of and the week after Christmas, are more lucrative than any opening weekend could be. So I think Disney just said, we like where we are. We think we're positioned to do well. We're just going to take the hit with not having IMAX, and we're going to have faith in the movie. Tully Quinn says, are there any films that are critically considered classics or masterpieces that you just don't get or even dislike? I was meh on Citizen Kane. A lot of people are. I actually rewatched it this year and liked it more than I remembered liking it. Sure, there are plenty of critically considered classics or masterpieces that I don't like. A lot of Italian cinema, the classic Italian cinema, Fellini, etc. I respect it. I absolutely respect it. I respect the craft. I respect the vision. I respect why it is loved so much, but it's not necessarily for me. It doesn't necessarily, engage the part of my brain other than kind of admiring the craft of it and understanding why it's so influential. So yeah, there's plenty. And I understand why some people see it and they see a masterpiece. I just don't. That's the great thing about movies. I think you just need to be able to understand why you don't like something, and also be able to say, well, this maybe isn't for me, but I respect what it is. And hopefully that was you on Citizen Kane, even if you're not totally wrapped up in the story. And I understand that the monumental achievement in actual filmmaking that movie was. It's maybe for its time the most impressive movie ever made, and still does things that I think are incredibly impressive. So I get it. Michael McKenzie 4726 says, hey Dan, did you check out the Tony trailer? I did not. I saw it came out, the Anthony Bourdain movie. I didn't, but I plan to check it out. InSheer01 says, y'all is a perfectly cromulent word. I agree. Y'all is a very cromulent word. And look at that Bart Simpson gif right after, or picture right after that. Drew Skizzy says, Mr. Beast was way better than Zach Brown and Billy. I agree. Mr. Beast was way better than Zach Brown and Billy. I actually saw a clip from Amy Poehler's podcast where they asked her about the Billie Eilish Idol on Survivor. And she looked like it didn't even, she was like, oh yeah, that. I wrote a letter to the contestants. Like, she was so, like, she didn't even care about it, which is crazy how much play it got. You'd think that Billie Eilish was like the biggest fan of Survivor. And then on Amy Poehler's podcast, she was just like, didn't even seem to care. I think they just wanted to use her name because it seemed impressive. But yeah, Mr. Beast, shocking to me that he was actually the best celebrity cameo this year. I would not have put my money on that. Svenus97 says, hey, Dan, what's your favorite format to watch a movie? Is it IMAX, Dolby Cinema, etc.? Looks like a double question, but we talked about that earlier. Bill Mao says, hi, Dan, not sure if you've talked about the Lego Enterprise set on air. Would love to hear what you like or think Lego could do better about it. Yeah, I got the Enterprise D right here. This was my Christmas. This is the only thing I asked for. I'm not 7 anymore, so I don't really have a Christmas list. But when people said, do you want anything for Christmas? I said, I would just kind of like if you're going to get me something, like the money to buy this, let's be risky here. Oh, it's so heavy. Yeah, it's the Enterprise D. I was so excited when I saw they were putting out this set, and I try not to put them together too quickly, but I put this one pretty quickly. What would I do better about it? Not much. I mean, I understand it's hard for Lego. If you're Lego, it's hard to do round shapes with Lego because they don't really make a whole lot of rounded Legos. So I feel like they did the best they could with the saucer section. I mean, it has a round shape, but it has little sort of segments in it. So, I wish that they had the technology to make it perfectly round, but that's not a criticism of Lego. That's just the nature of it. Yeah. I can't really think of anything I do differently. I mean, it's Lego. If you want like a screen accurate model of the Enterprise D, then you can buy those anywhere. I like the aesthetic of Lego, and yeah, that was a fun one to put together. Wells 009 says, I'm curious about what Counselor Troy did to lose her seat next to Picard on your Lego set. I'm guessing you mean this. It's crazy to me the details people pick up on this set, that you found the order of the crew on the. On the Enterprise. Honestly, that's just the order that it was in on the diagram. I'm a rules follower and I follow instructions. So you'd have to ask Lego why she's not next to Picard, because technically Riker is on the wrong side of him and everything else. Oh, geez, everything's falling over. Whatever. Yeah, no, you'd have to ask Lego. I'm not sure. Phil Smith says, "Hi, I enjoyed the Desert Warrior video. After the poor reception, do you have any thoughts on what Saudi Arabia's next move should be?" I don't know. Invest in better movies, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Better movie. Tsar Stephen says, I know anime films are a weak spot for you. Tekon Kincrete 20th soon. Is there any anime film you would love to see for a first time on the big screen? I need to go see more of those Ghibli, Studio Ghibli re-releases, because there's a lot that I haven't seen, and it's like I should see those for the first time in a theater, and I don't know why I don't, other than the fact that I just lose track of time. But yes, most of the Studio Ghibli films I haven't seen, I should just go throughout the year and see them when they're re-released. Harvsk 4181 says, regarding movies versus music, as much as it pains me, music might have to win out for me. At least with no movies, we still have books and TV shows. Well, that is true. That is true. It's just that movies are just so my life. I just can't imagine not having them, and I wouldn't have a job. RJW705 says, "What is your home theater setup like?" It's nothing fancy. I've got a TV. It's not a massive TV. It's a pretty good sized TV that's just on my entertainment center. It's just I don't hang the TV. I like to keep it kind of at eye level, and I just have a sound bar that has a subwoofer attached. So not surround sound speakers, but a nice, not top of the line or anything, but a good sound bar. And that's pretty much it. I've got a PS5, which plays my Blu-rays and 4K discs, and yeah, so probably similar to what a lot of people have in their houses. Christopher Brickner 5181 says, Nielsen said the three most watched Star Wars films in 2025 were 1, A New Hope, 2, Phantom Menace, 3, Rogue One. I'm shocked Phantom Menace was second. I didn't see that piece of data from Nielsen. That doesn't shock me, because again, the Phantom Menace is for a whole generation who are now consumer age. Well, I guess in the eyes of industry, that everyone's consumer age, but adults now, that's their A New Hope. So it doesn't surprise me, because that was their first Star Wars movie. Gimli 8621 says, what is a movie that is technically bad by every critical standard, but you still watch every time it's on TV? Mine is Battlefield Earth, a true guilty pleasure for me. It's weird. I think one of the things that we lost with streaming and the move away from cable is nobody ever catches a movie just flipping through the channels anymore. The Shawshank Redemption, I'm convinced that the Shawshank Redemption, one of the reasons that it became the #1 movie ever on IMDb is because TBS, going back to Ted Turner, one of his stations, would run that movie nonstop on the weekends for years. And so people would be flipping through and they'd see Morgan Freeman or Tim Robbins or whatever, and they'd say, oh, what's this? And then they get sucked into the movie, and then they look and see when's the next time it's on. Usually it was right after the same time again. And they'd be like, oh, that's a great movie. And we don't have that anymore. So I can't tell you the last time I was flipping through channels, because I don't even have cable anymore. I don't think I even have live TV at this point anymore. It's all streaming. So there aren't many movies that I watch when they're on TV anymore, because that's just not how it's all on demand. If there were one though that I was flipping through the channels and that I would stop on, I mean, nothing else would have to be on, but The Happening is hard for me to say. Like, there's not 5 minutes in that movie that I don't look forward to something bizarre happening. No pun intended. That I wouldn't stop and just be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to wait till the part where Marky Wahlberg sings Doobie Brothers to the guy on the porch. Damian Fenton 3880 says, hi Dan, what do you think is the biggest difference between American and British comedians? That is an interesting question. I think that British comedians are more subtle. I think so much more of the British comedy is based off of sort of dry wit and throwaway comments. Not that American comedians don't work in the same way, but I think it's a lot less more about selling your personality and a lot more about selling your jokes, if that makes sense. I think that a lot of comedians in America have very big personalities, and that doesn't mean they're not funny, but they have very big personalities, and so they're selling their whole sort of everything. And British culture is much more restrained and less outwardly ego-ish, and so it's much more about selling the actual material and wordplay and that very dry. And that's why I love it so much. I love dry humor and dry wit. And I think you see a lot more of that in a lot of the big British comedians. So that'd be part of it. One of my favorite, James Acaster things that I've seen from him, from his comedy set, is when he's kind of satirizing a lot of American comedians. The too edgy for you, that whole thing, which is also kind of satirizing Ricky Gervais to an extent. But yeah, I'd say it's less about personality and more about wit and that sort of thing. Roman Borowinski says, will you watch and review Daredevil Born Again Season 2? For me, it was better than the first season, but still meh. Maybe. I'm not in any rush to do it because I didn't love Season 1, so that doesn't make me say, oh, I have to watch Season 2. I'm watching The Boys, I'm watching Survivor, a lot of stuff. So we've got just a couple questions left, which is good because we should probably wrap up soon so I can get this out and then get to the soccer game. So this is from Black Bag V, who says, I've been obsessed with rewatching your champion entrances on the belt rounds of old movie fights. The music, your serious face, the intro and sound bites. You were my John Cena as a teen. Legendary. Wow. I'm glad you could see me at least. Yeah, those were fun. That was always just kind of up to me. Do you want to do anything? Do you want to do an entrance? And then I would come up with it's the Raid 2 shirt or whatever. And it really helped prep me for the Schmodown. The Schmodown and movie fights fed into each other a lot as far as both being on at the same time and kind of based on this fight championship structure. And a lot of what you see on movie fights would kind of get translated eventually into the Schmodown. So yeah, that was fun. I really, really love doing movie fights. And that's why I always say if they wanted me back, I'd be happy to go back. This is the last question, unless one comes in the next minute or so. Christopher Brickner 5181 says, FYI, you have to click on the Rotten Tomatoes percentage to see the critic rating out of 10. Oh, really? All right, let's take a look. This is what David Letterman, I think, used to do. Well, it still doesn't show up for me. Oh, there it is. Average of rated reviews, 6.1 out of 10 for Mortal Kombat 2. Look at that. Good for them. I honestly didn't think they'd ever bring it back. I really didn't. So I'm happy to see it back and not just part of a plugin. That's fantastic. So yeah, look at that. So yeah, if you want to know the average score on Rotten Tomatoes, click on the percentage and it'll say fresh, rotten, average percentage of rated reviews. That is great news. Thank you for that tip. And thank you for watching. Let me try to fly through some of these comments here. I don't know if I could be able to just grab one or the other. There were so many. Oh boy. You know what? Maybe this isn't the best show to do that for. There's just so much to wade through. I have no idea what the actual response other than the super chats are regarding the show earlier today. Like I said, I understand that it's probably not going to be all great, but that's, again, sometimes you just have to say what I think, and that's what I think. So thank you to everybody. Oh, I should probably take that. Sorry, Christopher, I just left your comment on screen forever. That'll do it for this week's show. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for everybody that sent in a question. Be sure to stay tuned right here. As I mentioned, tomorrow I'll be seeing Mortal Kombat 2. And I will also have that review up for that on Friday morning, unless something gets in my way that doesn't allow me to do that. I don't see any chance of that happening. So check out my review of Mortal Kombat 2 on Friday. That's the earliest that I can see it is tomorrow. Like I said, I'm working on that Oscar rules video, but I can't put a time on that because, like I said, I'm going to do some heavy deep dive research and see where the results take me. And I also want to kind of just do a lot of research. That's a research-based video, but you never know what else is going to pop up. Desert Warrior was something I didn't see coming, and the Academy rule changes last week was something I didn't see coming. So you never quite know what's going to be on the channel from week to week. But thank you for watching this video. I'll be back next week with another live show. So if you didn't get your question in today, you can go back and see if there's something that you maybe wanted to say. I just wanted to make sure. Yep, nothing else came in. So think of your question for next week. I'll be back next week with another show. Thanks to everybody who tuned in live. Thanks to everybody who's watching after the show is over, or anyone that's listening on the podcast feed. Hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed, and we'll see you next time. Bye.